Welcome to our channel, where we bring you the most inspiring and life-changing stories. Today, you are about to hear the incredible true story of a company that almost never existed. It is not just a story about shoes, it is a story about courage, impossible dreams, painful failures, sleepless nights, and one man's refusal to quit when the entire world believed he should. Imagine graduating from college with no clear future, no successful business, no wealthy investors, and no guarantee that your idea would ever work. Imagine borrowing money from your own father, filling the trunk of your car with running shoes, and driving hundreds of miles hoping that a few strangers might buy them. Most people would call that foolish. Many did. Banks doubted him. Competitors underestimated him. Friends questioned his decisions. There were moments when his company had almost no money left. There were nights when he wondered if everything he had worked for was about to disappear forever. Yet today, the company he built is recognized in nearly every country on Earth. Its famous swoosh logo is one of the most valuable symbols in business history. Millions of athletes wear its products every day, from neighborhood parks to the Olympic Games. That company is Nike, and this is the remarkable true story of the man who dared to challenge the biggest sports brands in the world. This story is not only inspiring, but also filled with powerful life lessons about persistence, innovation, and believing in an idea long before anyone else believes in it. Everything you're about to hear is based on true events. Some conversations have been recreated for storytelling, but the journey, the struggles, and the achievements are real. So sit back, relax, and let's travel back to the beginning. Our story starts on February 24th, 1938, in Portland, Oregon, where a baby boy named Phil Knight was born into a middle-class family. His father, William Knight, was a respected newspaper publisher and lawyer. He believed in discipline, responsibility, and earning success through hard work. Unlike many successful parents who open doors for their children, William refused to hand Phil any special opportunities. In fact, when Phil wanted a summer job at his father's newspaper, William intentionally refused to hire him. He believed that if his son wanted to succeed in life, he should learn to earn opportunities on his own. At first, Phil felt hurt and confused. He wondered why his own father would deny him such a simple chance. But years later, he would realize that this difficult lesson became one of the greatest gifts his father ever gave him. Since he couldn't work for his father, Phil found another newspaper job several miles away. Every morning before sunrise, while most teenagers were still asleep, Phil ran nearly 7 miles to work delivering newspapers. Then he ran back home after finishing his route. Without realizing it, those long, early morning runs were quietly shaping his future. They built discipline, endurance, and a deep appreciation for running that would eventually change his entire life. As Phil grew older, he developed a passion for athletics. He wasn't the fastest runner in America, but he loved competing and constantly looked for ways to improve. Running taught him that progress came from small improvements, repeated every single day. After graduating from high school, Phil enrolled at the University of Oregon, where he met the man who would forever change his life, Bill Bowerman. Bowerman was unlike any coach Phil had ever known. He wasn't satisfied with simply training athletes. He constantly searched for ways to make them faster. Every second mattered. Every ounce of weight mattered. He believed that even the smallest improvement in a runner's shoes could determine the outcome of a race. While other coaches focused only on training, Bowerman became obsessed with redesigning running shoes. He cut them apart, stitched them back together, experimented with different materials, and tested countless ideas. Sometimes his athletes thought he was crazy. Sometimes they laughed at his strange experiments. But Bowerman didn't care. He believed there had to be a better way. Phil admired his coach's relentless curiosity. During practices, Bowerman often discussed why German companies like Adidas and Puma dominated the athletic shoe industry. Their products were respected worldwide, while American runners had very few high-quality alternatives. These conversations planted a question deep inside Phil's mind. Why couldn't an American company create world-class running shoes? The idea stayed with him long after graduation. After earning his degree, Phil served 1 year in the United States Army before enrolling at Stanford Graduate School of Business. There, one assignment would unknowingly change history. Students were asked to develop a business plan for a fictional company. Most students chose ordinary ideas. Phil chose something different. He wrote a paper arguing that high-quality, affordable running shoes made in Japan could compete successfully against expensive German brands. At the time, Japan was becoming known for producing reliable products at lower costs. Phil believed that if someone could import those shoes into America, athletes would embrace them. His professor appreciated the creativity of the paper, but to most people it was simply another classroom assignment. Phil, however, couldn't stop thinking about it. What if this wasn't just homework? What if it could become his future? After graduating from Stanford in 1962, Phil made a bold decision. Instead of immediately settling into a comfortable career, he wanted to travel the world. His journey eventually brought him to Japan, where he hoped to visit the Onitsuka Company, makers of Tiger running shoes. Walking into the company's headquarters was intimidating. Phil wasn't an experienced businessman. He didn't own a company. He didn't even know if anyone would take him seriously. Yet when executives asked what business he represented, Phil made a split-second decision. He confidently replied that he represented a company called Blue Ribbon Sports. The truth was simple. Blue Ribbon Sports didn't actually exist yet. He invented the name on the spot. Sometimes the biggest opportunities begin with a single moment of courage, even when you don't feel ready. Surprisingly, the Japanese executives were impressed by Phil's enthusiasm. They agreed to let Blue Ribbon Sports distribute Tiger shoes in the United States. Phil walked out of that meeting holding a contract that could completely change his future. But he still faced a major problem. He had no office, no employees, no warehouse, and no customers. All he had was a dream and an agreement to sell shoes that hadn't even arrived yet. Months later, the first shipment finally reached America. Boxes of Tiger running shoes filled his parents' basement. There was no grand opening ceremony. There was no expensive advertising campaign. There was simply Phil, opening cardboard boxes one by one, hoping someone would buy what he believed in. Every weekend he loaded pairs of shoes into the trunk of his green Plymouth Valiant and drove to track meets across the Pacific Northwest. While athletes warmed up for races, Phil opened his trunk and displayed the shoes. Some runners ignored him completely. Others stopped to ask questions. A few decided to try them on. Every sale felt like a small victory. Every satisfied customer strengthened his belief that he was building something special. Little by little, the business began to grow. Phil soon realized he couldn't do everything alone. He reached out to the one person who understood running shoes better than anyone else, Coach Bill Bowerman. Bowerman agreed to become both a business partner and an investor, contributing $500 to help launch Blue Ribbon Sports. More importantly, he brought his endless passion for innovation. While Phil focused on selling shoes, Bowerman focused on making them better. Together, they formed an unlikely partnership that would eventually transform the sports industry forever. The journey, however, was only beginning, and their greatest challenges still lay ahead. Phil and Bill Bowerman quickly discovered that running a business was nothing like winning a race. Selling shoes was only the beginning. Every shipment arriving from Japan had to be paid for long before all the shoes could be sold. Money constantly flowed out faster than it came back in. As soon as one shipment sold successfully, Phil had to place another order immediately. The company was growing, but strangely, the more it grew, the less cash it seemed to have. Phil often joked later in life that Blue Ribbon Sports was always just a few weeks away from disaster. Every dollar mattered. Every bank meeting felt like a test of survival. Every delayed shipment threatened to destroy everything they had built. During the day, Phil still worked as an accountant because the business couldn't yet support him financially. At night, he answered customer letters, tracked inventory, and prepared orders. Weekends were spent driving hundreds of miles to athletic competitions. His life became a cycle of work, driving, selling, sleeping for a few hours, and doing it all over again. There was no luxury. There were no vacations. There were no guarantees. There was only the belief that one more customer, one more race, and one more shipment would slowly move them closer to success. Meanwhile, Bill Bowerman became even more obsessed with innovation. Every complaint from an athlete became another opportunity to improve. If runners said the shoes were too heavy, Bowerman searched for lighter materials. If they lacked traction, he redesigned the soles. His workshop looked more like a laboratory than a shoe studio. Pieces of rubber, leather, glue, scissors, and unfinished shoes covered every surface. Friends who visited sometimes wondered whether he had lost his mind. But Bowerman wasn't trying to copy anyone else. He wanted to build something that had never existed before. One quiet Sunday morning, while preparing breakfast with his wife, he stared at the family's waffle iron. The square grooves caught his attention. Suddenly, an idea flashed across his mind. What if the pattern inside the waffle iron could become the bottom of a running shoe? Without asking permission, Bowerman poured liquid rubber directly into the hot waffle maker. Moments later, smoke filled the kitchen. The smell of burning rubber spread through the house. His wife rushed in, shocked to discover that her favorite waffle iron had been completely ruined. But Bowerman hardly noticed. In his hands was the first rough version of what would eventually become one of the most revolutionary running shoe soles ever created. The waffle sole provided better grip, reduced weight, and improved flexibility. It looked strange, but athletes loved how it performed. Sometimes history changes not inside expensive research laboratories, but inside ordinary kitchens where curious people refuse to stop experimenting. As Blue Ribbon Sports continued growing, Phil faced another challenge. Their entire business depended on one supplier, Onitsuka Tiger in Japan. If that relationship failed, everything would collapse. At first, the partnership worked well. Tiger shoes gained popularity among American runners, and sales increased every year. But success often creates new problems. Onitsuka began questioning whether Blue Ribbon Sports should remain its exclusive American distributor. Other companies wanted the same opportunity. Phil started hearing rumors that Tiger was secretly negotiating with different distributors behind his back. At first, he dismissed the rumors. Surely the company wouldn't betray the people who had introduced their shoes to America. But the warnings became impossible to ignore. Meetings grew tense, letters became colder, trust slowly disappeared. Phil realized something terrifying. His business depended entirely on another company's decisions. If Onitsuka ended the partnership, Blue Ribbon Sports would have nothing left to sell. Instead of waiting for disaster, Phil made one of the boldest decisions of his life. If they could no longer depend on someone else's products, they would create their own. It sounded simple, but in reality it was incredibly risky. Designing shoes required money they barely had. Manufacturing required factories they didn't own. Marketing required a brand nobody recognized. Yet Phil understood something important. Remaining dependent on another company was even more dangerous than starting over. Around this time, one of Blue Ribbon Sports' earliest employees, Jeff Johnson, became deeply involved in the business. Johnson wasn't just another salesman. He loved running as much as Phil did, and he constantly thought about how the company could build its own identity. According to Phil, Johnson had a vivid dream one night in which a single word appeared over and over again. Nike. Named after the Greek goddess of victory, the name was short, memorable, and powerful. Phil wasn't immediately convinced. In fact, he considered several other names. But deadlines approached quickly, and eventually he agreed. Their new company would simply be called Nike. The next challenge was creating a logo. They needed something athletes would instantly recognize. Phil hired Carolyn Davidson, a graphic design student at Portland State University. She spent hours sketching ideas before presenting a simple curved mark that suggested speed and motion. Phil looked at it and honestly admitted, "I don't love it, but maybe it will grow on me." She was paid only $35 for the design. At the time, nobody imagined that this simple symbol would eventually become one of the most recognizable logos in human history. Years later, after Nike became a global giant, Phil surprised Davidson by giving her company stock and a special gold ring featuring the swoosh, recognizing her contribution to the company's success. The first Nike shoes finally entered production. Everyone was excited, but reality quickly interrupted the celebration. Manufacturing problems appeared almost immediately. Some shoes arrived with defects, others failed quality inspections. A few customers returned them after discovering that parts of the sole separated during races. Competitors criticized the young company, saying Nike was trying to do too much too quickly. Phil worried constantly that one major mistake could destroy their reputation forever. Yet something remarkable happened. Despite the imperfections, athletes loved the feeling of the shoes. They appreciated Bowerman's innovations and recognized that Nike genuinely cared about improving performance rather than simply selling products. Word began spreading from one runner to another. Without huge advertising budgets, satisfied athletes became Nike's greatest marketers. Every race introduced the shoes to new competitors. Every victory created another conversation. Every recommendation brought another customer. But the company's finances remained frighteningly unstable. Banks grew nervous because Nike expanded so rapidly. Inventory increased. Sales increased. Expenses increased even faster. At one point, the company owed more money than Phil believed it could ever repay. He visited banks repeatedly asking for larger credit lines, only to face skeptical executives who couldn't understand why a small shoe company needed so much borrowing. Phil later admitted that he often felt physically sick before these meetings. One rejection could end everything. Yet somehow, through persistence and careful negotiation, he kept convincing lenders to give Nike just enough time to survive another season. Then came one of the greatest opportunities in company history. America was experiencing a running boom. Millions of ordinary people suddenly discovered jogging as a healthy lifestyle. Parks filled with runners every morning. Community races attracted record participation. Fitness became fashionable. Nike happened to be perfectly positioned for this unexpected cultural shift. Demand exploded almost overnight. Stores that once ignored Nike suddenly wanted inventory. New retailers called, asking to become distributors. Athletes proudly wore Nike shoes during competitions across the country. For the first time, Phil began believing that his impossible dream might actually become reality. Still, enormous challenges remained ahead. Nike was no longer fighting simply to survive. It was preparing to battle the biggest names in global sports, companies with far greater resources, decades of experience, and worldwide recognition. The greatest victories and the greatest risks were still waiting just around the corner. Then came the moment that would transform Nike from a respected running shoe company into a global sports empire. In 1972, Nike officially introduced its new brand to the public during the U.S. Olympic track and field trials in Eugene, Oregon. It was a perfect stage. Thousands of athletes had gathered, each searching for every possible advantage. Among them were runners eager to test the newest innovations, and Nike was ready. The company displayed its lightweight shoes proudly, hoping they would capture attention. They did. Athletes began talking about the comfort, the grip, and the surprisingly light feeling that Bowerman's designs provided. Every positive review spread through the running community like wildfire. Sales increased rapidly, but success brought new pressure. Demand soon became greater than Nike's ability to produce shoes. Factories struggled to keep pace with orders. Delays became common. Phil Knight worried that disappointed customers might turn back to Adidas or Puma if Nike couldn't deliver products quickly enough. Every day felt like a race against time. Meanwhile, competition was becoming more aggressive. Adidas remained the king of athletic footwear, dominating international sports with decades of experience and countless championship athletes. Puma was growing stronger every year. Compared to these giants, Nike still looked like a small challenger trying to punch far above its weight. Many industry experts predicted that Nike would eventually disappear or be bought by a larger competitor. But Phil had never built his company by listening to experts. He believed that innovation and determination could defeat size. Around this time, Nike discovered something that would forever change its future. Phil realized that selling great shoes alone was no longer enough. People didn't just want products, they wanted heroes. They wanted athletes they could admire and imitate. If the world's greatest athletes trusted Nike, ordinary people would naturally follow. This idea became the foundation of Nike's marketing strategy. Rather than spending all its money on traditional advertising, Nike invested in relationships with athletes. Some of these partnerships were small at first, but they created enormous credibility. One athlete, however, stood above the rest. His name was Steve Prefontaine. Known simply as Pre by his fans, Steve wasn't just a talented runner. He was fearless. He ran every race with complete determination, refusing to hold anything back. Crowds loved his aggressive style because he never played it safe. He either won spectacularly or lost trying. There was no middle ground. Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman had known Prefontaine since his college days at the University of Oregon. Bowerman had coached him, while Phil admired his courage and charisma. Steve believed in Nike long before the company became famous. He proudly wore Nike shoes during competitions, helping introduce the brand to thousands of runners across America. To young athletes, Nike and Prefontaine became inseparable. His popularity gave the company a human face and an emotional story that no advertisement could ever buy. Then tragedy struck. On the night of May 30th, 1975, after attending a party, Steve Prefontaine was driving home when his sports car crashed on a narrow road in Eugene. The vehicle overturned, trapping him underneath. He was only 24 years old. The news spread quickly. Runners across America were devastated. Phil Knight later admitted that losing Prefontaine felt like losing a younger brother. Bill Bowerman was heartbroken. Nike had not only lost its greatest athlete, but also one of its closest friends. For several days, the atmosphere inside the company was filled with grief. Employees struggled to focus. Some wondered how Nike could move forward without the man who had inspired so many runners. Yet Steve's legacy continued to inspire the company. His fearless attitude became part of Nike's identity. Every new product, every innovation, and every challenge reminded Phil of Prefontaine's philosophy: to give everything you have, every single time. As the late 1970s progressed, the running craze continued growing across America. More people joined races than ever before. Schools expanded their athletic programs. Recreational jogging became a national movement. Nike's sales skyrocketed. The company that had once sold shoes from the trunk of a car was now generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. New offices opened. More employees joined the team. Distribution expanded across the United States and into international markets. But rapid growth created another problem. The company was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Departments expanded faster than systems could handle. Communication sometimes broke down. Inventory mistakes became costly. Phil often found himself making decisions late into the night, surrounded by stacks of financial reports and shipment schedules. Although Nike appeared successful from the outside, inside the company there was constant pressure to keep everything from falling apart. In December 1980, Nike took one of the biggest financial steps in its history by becoming a publicly traded company. The initial public offering was a massive success. Overnight, many early employees who had accepted stock instead of high salaries suddenly found themselves financially secure. Phil Knight also became extremely wealthy on paper, but he insisted that money had never been his primary motivation. To him, the company represented something much larger than wealth. It represented proof that impossible ideas could become reality through relentless effort. Going public gave Nike the resources to expand even faster. New research laboratories were built. Designers experimented with advanced materials. Engineers searched for technologies that could make athletes run faster, jump higher, and perform better than ever before. Yet while Nike celebrated its success, trouble was quietly approaching from an unexpected direction. During the early 1980s, basketball was becoming one of the fastest-growing sports in America. Young fans didn't simply admire basketball players, they idolized them. Nike recognized the opportunity, but there was one problem. The company was still known primarily for running shoes. In basketball, Converse dominated the market. Adidas also held enormous influence. Nike needed something extraordinary if it wanted to compete. Then in 1984, a young rookie entered the National Basketball Association. His name was Michael Jordan. Fresh out of the University of North Carolina, Jordan possessed remarkable talent, incredible confidence, and an unmatched desire to win. But at the time, he wasn't yet the global superstar the world remembers today. Most experts believed he would have a successful career, but nobody could predict the legend he would become. Nike's executives saw something different. They believed Jordan wasn't simply another athlete. He could become the face of an entirely new generation. Convincing him, however, would not be easy. Jordan's personal preference was Adidas. He admired their products and hoped to sign with them. His family also considered several other offers. Nike was viewed as an outsider in basketball. Many wondered why Jordan would choose a company famous for running instead of one already respected on the court. Determined not to lose the opportunity, Nike prepared one of the boldest endorsement offers ever made to a rookie athlete. They proposed creating an entire shoe line built around Michael Jordan himself. At the time, this idea was almost unheard of. Most companies simply paid athletes to wear existing products. Nike wanted to build a brand around one player. It was a huge gamble. If Jordan failed, Nike could lose millions of dollars. If he succeeded, everything would change forever. The meeting finally took place. Nike executives presented their vision with passion. They explained that they didn't just see Jordan as another basketball player. They saw him as the future of sports. Jordan listened carefully. His parents encouraged him to consider every opportunity before making a decision. After much discussion, Michael Jordan agreed to sign with Nike. It became one of the most important business decisions in sports history. Few people realized it at the time, but this partnership would completely transform not only Nike, but the entire relationship between athletes, fashion, and global culture. The greatest chapter in Nike's history was about to begin. Michael Jordan's first signature shoe, the Air Jordan 1, was released in 1985, and almost immediately it captured the world's attention. But the story became even more powerful because of an unexpected controversy. The National Basketball Association believed the shoes violated its uniform rules because of their bold black and red design. League officials informed Jordan that he would be fined every time he wore them during a game. Most companies would have redesigned the shoe to avoid trouble. Nike made a different decision. The company gladly paid every fine, turning what could have been bad publicity into one of the greatest marketing campaigns in history. Advertisements proudly told the story that the NBA had banned the shoe, even though it was technically the color combination that violated league rules. To millions of young fans, owning a pair of Air Jordans suddenly felt like owning something rebellious, exciting, and different. Stores sold out almost instantly. Long lines formed outside retailers. People who had never cared about basketball wanted the shoes simply because they represented confidence, individuality, and greatness. Air Jordan became more than a sneaker. It became a cultural phenomenon. Sales shattered expectations, generating hundreds of millions of dollars during the first year alone. Nike had discovered that it wasn't simply selling athletic equipment, it was selling inspiration, it was selling dreams. Throughout the following decades, Nike continued pushing the limits of innovation. Engineers developed lighter materials, stronger cushioning systems, and new technologies like Nike Air, allowing athletes to perform at levels that once seemed impossible. The company expanded into soccer, tennis, golf, football, training, and nearly every major sport in the world. It signed legendary athletes such as Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, Cristiano Ronaldo, LeBron James, and countless Olympic champions. Each partnership strengthened the message that Nike stood beside those who refused to settle for average. Yet success also brought criticism. During the 1990s, reports surfaced accusing some overseas factories producing Nike products of poor working conditions and unfair wages. The company's reputation faced one of its greatest challenges. Customers demanded answers. Protesters organized demonstrations. Newspapers around the world questioned whether one of the world's most admired brands had forgotten its values. Phil Knight understood that ignoring the problem would only make it worse. Nike began introducing stricter factory standards, increased in independent inspections, improved transparency, and invested more heavily in worker safety and labor conditions. The process was not perfect, and criticism did not disappear overnight, but the company recognized that true leadership meant accepting responsibility and striving to improve. It became another reminder that every great organization faces moments that test not only its business strategy, but also its character. As the years passed, Nike continued growing into one of the most valuable companies on earth. Today, its products are sold in more than 170 countries. Millions of athletes, from beginners taking their very first steps to professionals competing for Olympic gold, wear the famous swoosh with pride. The company generates tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue and employs thousands of people across the globe. Yet despite all the success, Phil Knight often reflected on how close the company came to failure during its earliest years. There were countless moments when one wrong decision, one rejected loan, or one missed shipment could have ended everything. If he had accepted the first comfortable job that came his way, Nike might never have existed. If Bill Bowerman had stopped experimenting after ruining his wife's waffle iron, one of the company's greatest innovations might never have been born. If Phil had allowed fear to control him during that first meeting in Japan, Blue Ribbon Sports would never have received its first shipment of shoes. History is often changed by people willing to take risks long before success is guaranteed. In his memoir, Shoe Dog, Phil Knight shared a lesson that perfectly captures his journey. He believed that life is a game where the greatest rewards belong to those who keep moving forward despite uncertainty. He never claimed to have all the answers. He simply refused to quit. That mindset became the foundation of Nike. Looking back, it is remarkable to think that one of the most recognizable brands in the world began with a young man driving from track meet to track meet, opening the trunk of his car, hoping someone would buy a pair of running shoes. There were no billion-dollar investments. There were no celebrity endorsements in the beginning. There was only hard work, persistence, and the courage to believe in an idea that almost everyone else considered impossible. Today, when people see the swoosh, they often think of championships, world records, and iconic athletes. But behind that simple logo is the story of a dream that survived rejection, financial hardship, fierce competition, and countless moments of doubt. It reminds us that success is rarely built overnight. It is built one decision at a time, one risk at a time, and one step at a time. The next time you see someone wearing a pair of Nike shoes, remember that you are looking at more than just a product. You are looking at decades of determination, innovation, resilience, and belief. Phil Knight proved that you do not need to come from extraordinary circumstances to build something extraordinary. Sometimes all you need is the courage to take the first step, even when you cannot see the finish line. Because every great journey begins the same way, not with certainty, not with applause, but with a single decision to keep moving forward. And perhaps somewhere in your own life, your first step is waiting for you today. Thank you for listening to this incredible true story. If this journey inspired you, remember that the greatest dreams often begin with the smallest actions. Keep learning, keep believing, and never stop moving forward.